Welcome to the dungeon with Harlan and Andrew.
Go for it, Andrew. We are in. And oh, wait, hold on. We're having audio issues. Like always. Like always. Okay, we did it now. We did it now. Let's do it one more time. Go for it. We had a new setup last night. Come on, cut me some slack.
Oh, no, it's fine. I almost made a joke about it. I was like, no, it's going to go smoothly. There's not going to be an audio issue. Hey, welcome to the dungeon. I'm Andrew Orvidal.
And I'm Harlan Kelly, and we're joined today by Connie, the GM for Transplanar RPG.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining us, Connie.
Thanks for having me.
And if you're new to our show, this is just a quick talk show where we chat with game masters about running tabletop role-playing games, all things tabletop role-playing games. So if you have questions, if you're watching, throw them in the chat. We love viewer questions, so we try to get to all of them. So if you think of a question, just put it in the chat.
Yeah, you don't gotta wait for us. Just pop them in there. That way we can budget time for it. We can get in and out of here. It'll be fun.
Totally.
Cool. Well, Connie, thank you again for joining us. We usually start off with the same question for everybody, and it's been really fun to see the similarities and differences with everyone too. So the first one is, what is your history with tabletop role-playing games? How did you start? What have you kind of played? Where is it at?
For sure. So for those of you who don't know who I am, again, my name's Connie. My pronouns are they, he, and she. I am currently the game master and executive producer behind Transplanar RPG, which is an all-transgender, person of color-led Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition livestream set in a non-colonial, anti-orientalist world. Though I haven't always been the GM and executive producer of Transplanar RPG, my journey with tabletop starts in the winter of 2016, I want to say. I threw a New Year's Eve party for a bunch of friends back home. This was when I was still in college. I was visiting winter break. Remember that? Parties, people, being around other people.
College.
How antiquated.
Yeah, college, right? And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to play Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to play a game that will hopefully become a long-running campaign. It was my first time GMing ever, or just being involved in D&D in any way or any sort of tabletop game. I think it went okay, but, in hindsight, it was a really messy first session. We didn't have a session 0. We just jumped right in. But it was fun, and I trusted my friends. We all knew each other. We've known each other since middle school, so we had a great time because it was just a bunch of friends hanging out. And after that, the itch, was kind of scratched for a little bit, but not for enough. And when we went back to school, I opened up a sort of long-term campaign. It sort of ran until my senior year, and we ended it the spring of my senior year. I graduated in May 2019, so that was about a year ago. So in that time, I've just been playing in other people's campaigns. I've been GMing, mostly Dungeons & Dragons, but I've dabbled in a little bit of other tabletop games, especially recently. And yeah, that's sort of how I started and got introduced to the game.
Man, that's one of the reasons I love this question, is because I feel like there's innately so much advice in just you talking about your process to people who want to run games, of you just jumping into it with your friends, not worrying about how it went. That's so cool and fun, and yeah.
Just busting it out at a party. That's awesome.
Oh, totally. Everyone else was like, can we I don't know, watch the ball drop or something? And I was like, no, we're gonna play
way
Dungeons
better.
Yeah, you have to roll for
6
it.
hours.
Yes.
That's so
awesome.
fun. Yeah, that's awesome. So what, just because we've been talking more about a lot of other games, what other games have you played?
Yeah, for sure. I think this was right before quarantine hit, probably in February or January of this year, I want to say. But I tried my best GMing a one-shot of Monster of the Week, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I had no idea what I was doing, and coming from a strictly pretty much D&D perspective, specifically running combat was really hard for me, and I actually took a lot away from that one shot and how I now run combat in D&D. But that was, that was a one shot I tried. I'm currently now playing in a game of Masks with Off the Table, which is also a PBTA, but it's the Masks system instead of Monster of the Week.
Cool.
I am also playing in a Quest RPG game with Utopia TV, which is an all BIMPOC tabletop channel. They're great. Y'all should check them out. Low-key plug. And I have also played Starcrossed, which is an indie game for two people. It's like telling a romantic story. I played that with my partner. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I would also love to try in the future Dread when we can touch people again, because it requires a Jenga tower.
Oh man,
nice.
That's cool. Yeah, Andrew and I have just tried out Tin Candles. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, Andrew has a big old backyard, so a couple of us have done the responsible IRL with candles game. So,
but one of the rules of the game is that if a candle goes out, it can't be relit for any reason. Even if it accidentally goes out, it gets everyone closer to dying at the end. And there's like this freak windstorm picked up and just blew out all the candles, like all at once.
I was gonna ask, like, the wind.
Yeah, so it was kind of a scattershot game, but we're gonna try again tomorrow.
It was like nature's way of giving us a little intro where we just kind of like, okay, you're done. Like, just you tried it. Now do it again sometime. But one of the things you said in that was you feel like you took a lot of things away from running Monster of the Week. I think that has been my biggest experience of like branching out outside of D&D is how much I learn about running the games that I am. Can you is there anything that pops out in your head about something you learned?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is probably letting players dictate how the combat goes and putting a lot more power in their hands. So in D&D, like, obviously you have like features that you can do cool stuff on your turn, but it's very it's based on an initiative order combat. It's always turn based. It's not that way in Monster of the Week. So it's actually inspired me to create and implement a homebrew, what I'm calling accelerated combat for now, a system for specifically combat on the road, like how to deal with it that isn't just like, okay, let's roll a D100, all right, y'all are facing like 4 goblins and like a wolf, and it's like a slog, it's like an hour long, and
the players don't care.
Travel in game. Yeah, exactly. It's like, who cares? Like, what's the stake here? Like, what's going on? Like, I'm just gonna hit this wolf, I guess, until it dies. So accelerated combat was sort of my approach to blending the more narrative sort of cinematic moments that can really occur in a Monster of the Week game with the roles, the D20 roles that makes, I think, D&D fun. So in our stream we've tried accelerated combat I think twice now in game, and the first time was fine, and the second time I think was better, and every time we do it the players are they feel a bit more secure in what they can and can't do during a given accelerated combat session. And I owe a lot of that design philosophy to Monster of the Week, as well as specifically to Starcrossed, surprisingly enough, which is that romance game where it's very improv heavy. They just throw like a list of prompts at you and you riff off of it, and that's sort of what we're also using in accelerated combat.
That's cool. What do you think the game gets from this combat system you're working with?
Yeah, so it's, first of all, we don't use a virtual tabletop in our streams. We don't use Roll20 or anything like that, which means that when combat does happen, description and like theater of the mind, like players knowing where they are, what they can and can't do in a given scene, and where enemies are is even more important because you don't have a visual guide.
Yeah.
So accelerated combat is also sort of my response to not utilizing a virtual tabletop in our stream.
Sure.
It's less focused on like, okay, how many squares away am I from this person? Am I 35 feet away? Can I move and then hit or whatever? And more focusing on like the broader strokes. Think of it as like a movie scene.
Yeah.
Like we're just playing it out, less so like how many feet, and more so like, okay, I just sort of want to run to the end of the hallway and jump out the window. It doesn't matter how much speed you're using. Just like if it's cool and if it sounds like something that can be done on your turn, sure, let's let it slide. That sort of thing.
That's so cool. And I mean that stuff takes a lot of like trust and like with your players too. I feel like because I feel I've just played in games where you're kind of like having to litigate something and there's like pressure one way or the other of like the success and so yeah, that's cool that you all can do that because it is the fun of it, like that movie scene.
Yeah, I hear accelerated combat in 5e. I'm like, what? That sounds amazing. Yeah, there was a time I was running a game of Cyberpunk Red and I came up with something called cinematic mode for inconsequential fights, where it was like, what cool thing would you like to do on your turn? And then you basically, it came down to the equivalent of a coin toss of a roll. And it was like, yep, you did that. You did a flip and it just sped things up. So what would have taken like an hour, it's cool when it's like, cool, that was like 8 minutes. Now we can get back to the other stuff.
Exactly. So, and I think the term you used, inconsequential fights, is really key here because it's in the text of like the draft I wrote up for the mechanics of accelerated combat, but I specifically put in there that this is for fights that are non-lethal. At least like the PCs are guaranteed to not die during these fights because one, my first, bullet of reasoning is it would kind of suck to die during accelerated combat. It's 3 rolls, and if you roll poorly, then you die. That kind of sucks. Like you want death to feel big in D&D especially. And the second one is it's supposed to be accelerated. It's fast. It would feel kind of weird if by the end of it, you're lying in a pool of your own blood. So that's something I'm thinking about. I don't think I would use accelerated combat for boss fights or even fights that are more than just encounters on the road. It's like these are just like things to consider when I'm running this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been just like a friend of mine is starting to DM, and I'm the person that loves jumping in when it's like, oh, you want to talk about DMing? Like, oh, sure, I'll talk to you, like blah blah blah. And but I feel like it's been helpful run these dungeon discussions sometimes because the questions he has are so like, I'm like, oh yeah, I forget that we have to deal with this because he was asking specifically about that, about like how often should I make a lethal fight, and not just in counterbalance, but like what if they don't care and things like that. And it seems like your approach to this is really tapping into kind of like the DNA of fights a little bit, where that's why people are talking about balance, because they want like to make sure it doesn't seem like unfair of a fight with a bad guy, but also you want them to feel like there to be stakes and for them to so it seems like a good balance of that, where the stakes are like, we want this to be cool and fun instead of like, we want to not die.
Exactly. Something else I built into it was this idea of lasting injuries that can occur if you're like rolls are not particularly good, that can affect how you flavor and play out the rest of your travel period. And if you roll like a nat 1, which actually one of our characters did recently, then you get a scar from accelerated combat.
Sick.
Nice.
And like the stakes can also be like if the party in general just does poorly, they could get captured. Like they have a magical item taken from them. Like it can be any number of consequences that also suck that aren't death.
Yeah, we've talked about it on here before of like how meaningful permanent consequences can be that can be in place of death. That feel like there's something at stake, and that thing is at stake is I like Andrew's character in our streamed game just lost an eye because
eyeball.
Yeah.
Oh no.
And which was his choice, but it was his choice because of some like litigation of rules where he actually died, and we were like, wait, if we messed up this rule, blah blah blah, it's a whole thing. But this I think that's one of the things we've discussed here, is like you can still make it feel big and huge to the story of the game and important, even if it's like a scar or something, because the scar is like, ooh, this goblin got me or whatever.
Do your players get to choose their scar, or do you get to choose it for them, or is it like a roll table?
I let them choose. It also depends on how the combat goes. Specifically in this situation, it was a scar on the character's leg because we had collaboratively narrated it as like a monster chomping on her, a big Tifi cloak monster chopped on her,
Hell
and
yeah.
it got her leg real good. And I was like, where do you think this scar would be? And she was like, well, probably my leg. We decided that way. I don't necessarily like rolling on tables to decide these sorts of things when I think a lot of the fun can be, again, like taking a leaf out of Monster of the Week. The players decide how the action occurs to them, and also that they impose upon monsters. I pretty much let my players narrate what happens during combat, and I only really step in during accelerated combat specifically when there's like some gray area, like, okay, well, how would this monster behave if I did this? Then I describe how it would behave, but I sort of let them sit in the driver's seat, frankly, and let them decide, like, how do you want to fail? Okay, you rolled kind of poorly on your fight roll. What does this mean? How do we fail? And like, the player might decide that means he's cowardly, or that he just trips, or that he sleeps through like half of the fight and then only wakes up during the end. Whatever.
Nice. Yeah, that's fun too,
awesome.
Especially if your players are like excited about jumping in there, because then I think that's another thing we've talked about, is like how much a myth it is that the DM is totally driving the story, or is like has the story behind their screen. And so I think that is an amazing tip for if you were watching this and you're working on DMing or want to be a DM. That I think steal that from the game, because that's such a good, like, tell your players they have to be the one to make the decision, because they don't want to be like, oh well, I just like hurt my finger a little bit. They don't want they don't want to most of the time. They want something bad to happen if they know they failed. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's the other issue with those roll tables, like you were just saying, is they don't add up at all sometimes. Like in the Alien role-playing game, there's a critical injury table, and someone will get their hand caught in like a power door, and they have to roll in the critical injury table, and it's like, you got a sprained ankle. It's like, this, I don't even know how to narratively spin this, how this could possibly happen. But it kind of like yanks people out of it when the consequences aren't lining up with that. But yeah, if the players get to do it, then it's perfect, because they know exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we're speeding through it. We always speed through this, but
it's 30 minutes. It's
so fast. But I want to talk a little bit about your game specifically, because a thing that has stuck out to me is how cool your homebrew world is, and how focused it seems to be, and just like clearly, just from even being able to, being new to the show and from the brief glance, I'm immediately sucked into like what's going on here. Like, you all have the map up, and just from the beginning of your show, like the world is so vividly a part of everything that's happening. And you've homebrewed that, right? Like you have written this. This is your thing a bit. I mean, definitely along with the players and everything. But I'd love to. I don't really have a question. It's more of just like, I'd love to hear about how you do that, like your process of that, because I think that's a great way to kind of like expand your gameplay and engage the players, but it's daunting and difficult to do often.
For sure, I hear you, Harlan, and actually thank you for asking that. It's a great question. So before we started streaming, we got together and we had a session -1 as well as a session 0, where during session -1, we talked about like, okay, what do we want this stream to look like? Like, what are some wish list items? What are the themes we're exploring here? Like, what are some of the motifs we want to recur? Like, what kind, what's on our wish list as players? Like, it was as, inane as hot villains, right? And as like serious as like, I want to explore themes of destiny versus choice.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can do that. We also talked about during the session 0 -1 planning, the world. We all knew that straight up from the bat, we were like, okay, do we want to run a module or do we want to do a homebrew world? And we all decided that they wanted me to make a homebrew world for various reasons. Chief among them was actually because, we're led by people of color and we're all transgender, and we wanted to imagine a world where trans is normal. We don't have to worry about transphobia, transmisogyny, and also, where the setting is not rooted in Western European logics. Pretty much every country, real world country that the world of Andake is based off of, it's like China, Japan, Russia, Hawaii, India, etc. And I, did a ton and continue to do a ton of research into these real world cultures that I can then sort of inject into each session or into like each place in the world. So that is a big inspiration when it comes to building my homebrew world. We wanted to step away from normative ways of thinking about medieval fantasy. We also, I graduated college with a double major in screenwriting and critical race studies. So thinking of world as one of the 3 critical pillars of story, in addition to plot and character, has really influenced the way I approach designing a homebrew world. I'm thinking not only of like, okay, what's the food here, but also like, how is this food related to the themes that we're exploring here? Like, can everything be tied back into this one central theme? Which honestly, the answer is no, because it's a tabletop game and not a script. But it's a fun thought exercise.
It's so interesting that, because I think a lot of people like we were joking before the stream was live about how a lot of people in high school were either improv folks or theater or acapella folks. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people, I graduated with a creative writing degree too, and I feel that like drive to like, oh, I'm going to tell this story here, but I really, really like that about role-playing games, that it's not me alone making all these decisions about these fictional characters. It's like I get to be surprised by what other people are like taking and playing with the things that I do too. So that's like I can see those threads in your world, and it's just very cool. And
Thank you. Yeah, totally. And I think the really liberating and fun thing about a homebrew world is you do whatever you want with it. And it's like, I honestly don't, not to rag on people who run modules at all, like I think I see the appeal in that for sure.
Yeah.
But like I don't think I could run a module. And if I did, I would only use it as a starting point and do my own thing after like a few sessions.
Man,
sure.
I have always wanted to. I started doing just smaller things of just like, I just didn't know how to do any of it at all. So I was just like futzing around with everything. And I ran in a homebrew world at the beginning, specifically because I was like, well, I don't understand any of this, so I'm just going to be able to make whatever up. And now I've been trying to run a module, and I'm like, dang, like it's so much more fun to just make up absolutely anything. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, Andrew, you've done that too in a different way with like Monsters for Gold. I always say it in the wrong order. What is it? Gold for Monsters?
Gold
for yeah. He always corrects me, and it's like, the other one's a pawn shop. Yeah.
They could both be a pawn shop.
Yeah. But Andrew's designed a system where it's very much built to beat the scheduling issues of D&D, where like anyone can show up, your player level is locked, and then you just go and do missions, and it's super fun and like engaging in the way of like a different style of gameplay, and for it to be accessible for people to just like pop in and out. But so yeah, I think, I don't know, I just really encourage anyone watching this to make anything up, do whatever you want, because then
and even if you don't like it, you'll learn all the things you didn't like about it. You're like, oh, I went too far with that, or that was too crazy or something. Have you found anything in, you mentioned like reading about real world cultures and doing that work, both to be able to incorporate it in a positive way, but also to like as inspiration, right? Too, is that what you were saying? Yeah.
Yes.
Have you found any like little gems of something that pops into your head of like, man, I would have never known this if I wasn't doing this?
Yes, absolutely. The first thing that pops into mind is, I think this was episode 4, where we meet this group of one-legged turquoise scaled oxen that live inside this big chasm.
Wait, hold on. Just one-legged turquoise scaled. Turquoise scaled.
It's like a Mad Libs.
Okay, got it. Yeah. I had to put them in the right order to get it.
Yeah. And people, the audience were like, "Oh, that's such a weird homebrew creature. Weird, but interesting. Okay, Connie, but this is actually a real creature in Chinese mythology.
Awesome.
They're known as Kui, and I had no idea what they were, even though I'm Chinese and I love my Chinese mythology. I didn't discover Kui and a bunch of other like kind of like like alternative Chinese monsters until I like started really digging deep, like getting elbows deep into the lore of various aspects, the folklores and mythologies present in like ancient and medieval China. And I'm excited to continue doing that work and finding these little hidden gems that I otherwise would never have imagined. Because when we think like mythology of China and we think like monsters in China, I think like Kirin, Phoenix, maybe dragons, maybe white tigers and big tortoises, like an Avatar, like the big like world tortoises.
Yeah.
But like if there's always so much underneath the surface, and there's every culture is so rich, and has their own way of looking at the world and telling stories about themselves, and that's what I'm interested in when designing Andake, which is the name of our homebrew world.
Yeah,
Nice.
That is fantastic.
So cool.
I want to I just want to go read for the next hour now because I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, what monsters am I missing? I'm gonna go find
Literally,
them.
there's so many weird beasties out there.
Dude, you gotta write a stat block for that one-legged scaled ox and like post that online. I want to say I'll buy it. Do it. Throw it out there.
I will write a stat block. They eat rocks. It's like,
Does
they
he?
eat
Nice.
rocks.
That's awesome.
It's so weird. Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's so many monsters in the D&D manual are based off stuff like that anyway, so it's awesome. Okay, we have a little segment here more toward the end.
A little question roll table. If you could roll a d20 and let me pull it up here.
Yeah, we've got a little table to let the dice decide what we're going to ask for the end. Also, we've got a little bit of time here. If you have questions, this is the last call for them. We can sneak in maybe one or two. So if you got a question, throw them at us, but roll that d20. Tell us what you get.
Is that table up?
You got that table, Andrew?
Great.
Go for it.
Got it.
That's a 10.
A 10.
Awesome.
Oh, we kind of already covered this, but I'll ask it, and if we want, we can.
You can always
hit
roll with
another
advantage.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
This question is, what's a table rule that you have that you wish would be canon? You do have that accelerated combat, which I wish would be canon, without even knowing about it, because that sounds amazing. But yeah, I was just curious if you have a general table rule that you're like, this. I wish this was just like in the 5e book.
The first thing that comes to mind is establishing lines and veils. I wish that establishing boundaries was just a normal part of every session 0, and in fact not just normal but required. Yeah, straight up. Just it doesn't even have to be lines and veils. It can be whatever safety tool system your table might have implemented. It just, especially if you're playing with people you don't know very well, or like have found online, or like friends of friends, it's so necessary, and it can avoid so much pain, that it is very avoidable, and also set a tone for how players and GMs are allowed to talk to each other.
Yeah, that's great. We had a guest on here, Brianna, who brought that up. We were talking about this exact same thing, and she had started playing mostly just at meetups and had mostly running games in meetups. And I think it's a thing that's taken for granted because a lot of the times you're playing with your friends, and even when there are things that you should kind of like discuss out of game, or like weird tense in game moments. That's I feel like it's kind of like forgotten that how many people play D&D with strangers all the time, and so that like those rules should be there for them too. Yeah, so good. Do you have
any favorite technologies? Yeah, sorry, I was going to ask if you had any favorite technologies or techniques that that you implement or that you would suggest.
I think this is a PDF that's floated around the internet for a little bit, and you have probably seen it. The RPG consent sheet.
Yeah.
Is like a really good starting point. You fill out like your name and stuff like that, and it has like a pretty cohesive like list of like a bunch of topics that are commonly triggering like sexual assault, as well as like racism, police brutality, that sort of thing, like genocide and like tornadoes and like natural disasters, like stuff like that. And they have like a column next to each topic of like, oh, is this okay? Like, yes, include this. I'm totally fine. Is it a gray area where like, oh, maybe not too graphic, or we can talk about this more? Or is it like a hard no? Like, don't include this at all in the campaign. And these sheets are a great way to open up a conversation around what is and isn't okay in any given campaign. I've also played with lines and veils with a lot of online groups before, where it's like an Excel sheet similar to this, but you bring up your own topics that are like lines or veils. Lines are like hard lines, boundaries, like no. Veils are like like we're getting into tricky territory, but I'm not completely against it. And also a space to add topics you want to be included. Like if you really want to explore interpersonal drama or like a strained family relationship, you can put that in. And just, it's again, like all of these tools I think are a starting point for opening a conversation that you should have in person or over video chat or voice chat or text or whatever the method is of playing the game. It doesn't just start and stop with a single safety mechanic. It is an evolving conversation, and some people might discover boundaries through play that they didn't realize they had, or they might realize that, hey, I thought I wasn't okay with, you know, exploring topics of self-harm, but the way that we're handling this is actually helping me, and I would like to explore this more. Like stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
Could also come up.
I was gonna say that exact thing. Of like, I feel like I've been surprised by what I want to jump into, or like what players want to jump into, of like we like this, like we want to do more of this, and that provides opportunities for like games to be super emotional and cathartic and be able to like process things, but also do it in a very like safe way that is where everyone's on the same team. Yeah, and I love those the sheets too, because it makes you, it really isn't just what you imagine it could be isolating or triggering in the game. I feel like they're so minute where I'm like, oh, what? Oh, okay, yeah, of course, someone could have
I would never think
with
tornadoes, but now that I'm like, oh yeah, I could see what that,
Yeah, and the sheet has stuff like bugs, you know, on it too, and like eye gore, like stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I like never would have thought that could be problematic for someone.
But yeah, we ran into a bugs issue in one of our games. Yeah,
it was
right before a boss battle. Like they were like, that boss is a giant spider, and the spider was like, no.
Yep. And some people are arachnophobic, like for sure.
Yeah.
And it was great because the person communicated to us, and I was DMing the game, and I just was like, sure, let's just break for 10 minutes. I can change out this CR monster, no problem. It's really not that easy to make people
like make it a big lizard or something.
Yeah,
you know, or like just swap out the, you know,
Yeah, I made it a beholder, but it didn't disintegrate anyone. So
you signed up for a big spider. Here, have something much more.
Yeah, now your pet wolf is disintegrated. I hope you're happy.
No, hey, you were fine. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's it. That's time.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll have it in chat, but is there anything you want to plug? Your live stream?
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me just do the quick little spiel. So again, my name is Connie. I'm the GM and executive producer behind Transplanar RPG. Look at the trans flag behind me. We stream on alternating Saturdays at 3 p.m. Central. I believe that is 1 hour in front of Mountain Time, where y'all are. On alternating Saturdays, the Saturdays that we don't stream our main campaign, we have a GM advice talk show where I give advice. And after the talk show ends, we have a player talk back about the episode that aired the week before. I think this Saturday coming up, the 12th, is my next lecture, Professor Chong's. I will be talking about sexy villains. That was the outcome of a poll I had, specifically villain design beyond that. Not just what makes villains hot, but how to design and run cool villains. So if you're interested in that, give us a follow on Transplanar RPG on Twitch and Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow my personal account at by Connie Chong on Twitter.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
I'm dropping those links in the chat for everybody if you need them. But yeah, thank you so much for just coming and sharing the games that you're running, and it's been great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And Andrew, you want to do the quick outskis, and then we can
thanks to everybody who watched. Yeah, and Harlan and I have a actual play Spelljammer inspired campaign that we play every Monday night right here at 7 p.m. Pacific. So yeah, if you want to check that out. And yeah, did I forget anything?
No, that's
else?
it. That's it.
That's it. Yeah. Oh yeah, and as we're trying to start this cultural change, tip your DM.
Yeah, everybody tip your DM.
Tip your DM.
Do it. All right. Thanks, y'all. Have a good night. We'll see you later.
Peace.